A long-awaited report in the United States has strongly criticized the FBI over the way it investigated allegations of collusion between Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign and Russia. The findings, made by a special counsel appointed by the Trump administration, are at odds with the previous inquiry that concluded there was no evidence of political bias. Special counsel John Durham says the agency lacked evidence and relied too heavily on clips from Mr. Trump's political opponents. The former president is urging Congress to take action, describing it as treason and the crime of the century. Well, for more on this, let's bring in Arise U.S. correspondent Eric Ham, who joins me from Washington. Good to see you, Eric. So, controversy over the FBI's investigation of Russia's alleged involvement in Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, with an inquiry concluding that there was political bias by the FBI against Mr. Trump. What do you make of those findings?
Well, that's right, Charles. We actually got the report exactly 4 years to the day that the special counsel was actually implemented to basically investigate the investigators. And after 4 years, more than $6.5 million spent, we now see this 300-plus page report by the special counsel, John Durham, that basically FBI actually had confirmation bias and actually did some things that they believe did not actually warrant what the FBI should have concluded. Now, what we do know is that while the report was very harsh about the FBI and its investigation, John Durham in his report goes on to say that a preliminary investigation into Donald Trump and his ties to Russia, in fact, was warranted and should have actually gone forward. But as a preliminary investigation, not a full-blown investigation, which is actually what we saw take place. And it's also important that while this report was released, we also have the Inspector General that released a report back in 2019 that actually said that the FBI was actually correct in its investigation. There was no political bias, and that there were some issues with the investigation. And we do know that the FBI has already sought to address those issues. In fact, Christopher Wray put out a statement that said that many of the FBI investigators, as well as the leadership that was involved during this investigation that was launched in 2016 and 2017, he said that now all of those people that were involved are no longer at the FBI, and that the FBI has implemented a series of new rules and protocols to ensure that what took place in this investigation, in the initial investigation into Donald Trump, will not happen again. It's also important to note that John Durham's investigation, while we were led to believe from himself that it would unveil the crime of the century and that many people would actually go to prison, what we saw from this investigation was that there were no people who were actually found guilty of any crimes, and that the one person that was a former FBI agent pled guilty to falsifying a report that actually led to a one year probationary period.
And not surprisingly, Eric, Donald Trump has been very quick off the blocks to say that this proves his point that all this is a scam and a witch hunt against him. Tell us more about what he's been saying briefly.
Yeah, that's right. And also we have heard from members of Congress. In fact, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Jim Jordan, has stated that now he wants to have John Durham actually testify before the House Judiciary Committee. But remember, they've got this subcommittee on the weaponization of the government, and they want him to be the key witness for one of the hearings going forward.
So, I mean, how do we situate this, Eric, in the current political climate in America? Because, I mean, while this report is critical, it doesn't really find some sort of widespread deep state efforts to go after Donald Trump.
Well, yeah, that's right. In fact, this is, and also too, we have to remember, Charles, this is one special counsel investigation that is concluding, and we know that there have been several in special counsels that we have seen in recent years. Was the Mueller probe, the John Durham probe, and we now know that there's the Jack Smith probe. And so clearly what we're seeing is a bevy of special counsel investigations looking at a number of different issues ranging from the Trump administration. But we cannot actually underscore the fact that it was the Mueller probe that led to several guilty pleas of high profile Trump appointees and government officials, as well as indictments against key Russian figures as well.
Meanwhile, despite all these controversies and cases against him, polls suggest Mr. Trump remains the front runner to be the Republican Party's presidential nominee in 2024. So they seem to be sticking with him at the moment, and no sense at all that it's time to move on from Donald Trump.
Well, what we are seeing, Charles, is that clearly this latest report by John Durham is certainly closes on the Trump-Russia collusion aspect of Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, as well as his subsequent presidency. And while that door has certainly closed, we do know now that you're right. He remains the front runner in the 2024 presidential campaign. But of course, we're now learning from our sources that Ron DeSantis is expected to announce at the end of this month. And of course, that could change the tone and tenor of the race going forward.
Eric, thanks very much indeed. Eric Ham, Arise US correspondent, talking to me there from Washington.